Hey, what is going on, RoK Fam? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder, and today we are back again giving you some high quality education and information in our next part to our Creating a Jumper Project series. Now, before we dive in and get started, as always, make sure you guys sub, like, ring the notification bell, and of course, if you want to join and be a part of our conversation, you can hit up our Discord, which you'll find in the pinned comment and description down below. Now, today we are actually going to be touching on possibly the last video that we do in the series, which is going to be covering Zone 2, Zone 3, and then pretty much Lost Temple and kind of KvK prep, because this can, for the most part, it could all pretty much be bundled into one. So from here, right, you can see that from the last series, right, we kind of talked about what the build up and the lead up was going to Zone 2 right from your Zone 1 passes. So now you're in Zone 2, and the things that we talked about before that you just really need to be cognizant of is being aware that, first and foremost, you only have a limited number of shrines. And based on what the actual buffs are for the shrines, right, there are obviously going to be some that are more ideal, potentially a little more sought after by some, if not maybe everyone. From here, it is important. So I get for the late night recordings. It's important to make sure that when you are looking at how Zone 2 is going to develop, you are taking what you are seeing in Zone 1, right? How many alliances prior to Zone 2 opening up, whether it's a week or so, that you're gauging are going to be strong enough to go into Zone 2 from Zone 1. Once you feel like you have a number, whether that, maybe you have 3 alliances here in this Zone 1, but you only have 2 over here that are really kind of, ahead of the pack, right? Maybe in this Zone 1, you only have 1 alliance, really, that is extremely active, and they're pretty much taking everything. Everyone else is either slow progressing or there's just not a lot of action in one zone. Try and consider looking at those factors so that way you can figure out how many alliances per Zone 1 are really going to be in an ideal situation to progress going into Zone 2. And remember, like we talked about before, it also depends on how many alliances you have in your project. Right? Are you just 1? Are you 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, however many? Right? And you also have to consider, right, how are your alliances doing? And then, what, based on your positioning, right, what Zone 2s are you going to be branching into? Killing me softly. And then from there, right, once you end up getting to this point where you have this number down, you already have an idea on how many are going to go into Zone 2, you have to then consider, right, who's going to get what shrines. Because how you really want to try and hopefully figure it out is to put alliances in positions for the shrines that are most likely going to have a good chance at making it to Zone 3, but could also be alliances that you might merge into instead of from, right? An example of this is that if you, like, let's just say, because, right, you got 3 shrines per Zone 2 district. So let's say that you take 9 alliances into Zone 2. Maybe the water will help. But for whatever reason, you're not going to take 9 alliances into Zone 3. So what you could do is, let's say you take 6 alliances into Zone 3, right? But you know that 3 alliances are going to be left over. You could use those 3 alliances as kind of developing shells, right? Developing alliances where you can take the Zone 1 players and fill them into those alliances. Why? Well, one, because they'll get access to higher level zones, a bigger alliance, a few more buffs, unless, right, and you can kind of use that as like a staging alliance or a development alliance to where you eventually push those into Zone 3 alliances, right? Or you can do it vice versa. You can just push the alliances into Zone 3 alliances, one Zone 3 opens up, and then you fill in the remaining alliances, right, that are in Zone 2 first and try and fill those out. Or I should say fill into 3, fill out 3, or I should say merge into Zone 3 alliances, right? And then you fill out the activity there. And then you can kind of start looking at your Zone 2 alliances that you're developing and prepping, or you're still developing at that time. So there's a few ways you can really do it. But the important thing here is figuring out how many alliances you plan to have going into Zone 2, how you're going to divvy up and split buffs, because you want to try and make it at least as even, right, and as spread out as you can. And then eventually when Zone 3 opens, that's the big question, is how many alliances are you going to take going into Zone 3? Because from here, it then becomes important to appropriately gauge. Are you going to take 3 alliances in? Are you going to take 4, 5, 6, however many? Figuring that out ahead of time as well on how many alliances you're going to bring in will actually help you game plan not only out your Zone 2, but even to a decent-ish degree as well, your Zone 1 prep. Now you've made it into Zone 3, and at this point, you now have to figure out how you're going to flag. Are you going to split everything equally? Are you going to have the strongest alliances taking, you're going to do like a percentage where you say, you take 5 alliances in, but the strongest one is going to get, 25%. And then you kind of do, lesser percentage breakdowns, but you'll get more than if you're doing it even split. Right? And then from there, you have to figure out how you're going to do your rotation, right? How many alliances are going to be in your Lost Temple rotation? And then eventually, once you get, right, because remember, you have to be aware that you have to, well, not even just aware, right, that there's a smaller space in Zone 3 than there is in 1 and 2, but that you want to try and have as much flagging utilized in Zone 3, right, to make sure you guys are occupying all of the RSS tiles, and then any additional flagging that may need to be done at that point. And that's just so you're maximizing, right, your coverage area. Now, you've gotten to a point where Lost Temple is up, and you can take it. So you take Lost Temple. Okay. And we'll go in, and there's, things you're going to have to do. You're going to have to give out titles. You're going to have to give out negative titles. You're going to have to issue buffs, right, on what you're going to hit. You'll have to distribute your gifts to your players. You're going to have to, we'll go to King, it's just record, right? You're going to have to send mails out to the kingdom. You're going to have to work on immigration, right, depending on what you want the cap set at. You have to work on, that's just titles here, right? You have to work on skills, right, if you want to use any of these. And the important part here is that you have to make sure that the people that you're putting in rotation, right, are familiar, right, or maybe you're someone who's just going to help and assist and kind of guide them along. The arguably most important things that you're probably going to end up doing just from having King is going to be, first and foremost, I think, setting mails, right? You're going to have to do buffs, and obviously who's ever going to be in charge of kind of giving titles out, which is, obviously the most important ones that you're usually going to be doing is kind of like your building speeds, right? So your prime minister, your architect, and then where's the, what am I looking at here? Your architect and scientist, right, for research speed and for building speed, and then your duke for training. Right, so again, those are going to be your 3 most important, and then obviously whoever you want to end up setting, right, for some of the extras. But again, you're going to have someone there, right? And that's the other part, is that if you're going to have your title room set up, you have to make sure that you are putting people in place that are going to want to do those things. And what that really means is coming up with a schedule ahead of time. Right, I'm not sure who messes around with like the bot route, but if you're doing everything manually, which is usually what by default everyone will be if they're not familiar with how to do other things, getting a schedule set up earlier rather than later within your team to make sure that you are either having people dedicated on like 2 to 4 hour rotations, or the important thing here, right, is that if you know you don't have enough people to do a 24-hour rotation, then put a schedule out week by week. And then you send a server mail out and you tell people, hey, this is what the schedule is at minimum, because that lowers expectations and it also saves you and your team a headache, right? An example, if some people think that we're going to do a 24/7 rotation, right, but I can only be on for 4 days, right? Let's just say 6 hours out of the day, or we only have a 6 hour coverage period during a day, then you let people know what that coverage period is, when people can start asking for titles, and when the room is going to be active, right? And you do that while at the same time you are providing friendly reminders. You're letting people know, hey, we're looking for title givers, even if you can only dedicate an hour or two here or there, right? If you apply a little bit of organizational skills, you can hopefully over a period of time find people to give out titles, right? And you can slowly just kind of keep working your way up to, a 24/7 period. And obviously the important part is that, right, who's ever running LT, you'd have to make sure that, you're trying to find people within your alliance, obviously when it's your turn. But outside of that, you can still look for people that are available, even if it's doing something as simple as just putting alts, right, for the people that are available in just having alts already that they can just easily put into an alliance when it's their turn, right? Unless they're literally are at 100% activity, then you're going to have to try and obviously find. You can also do it where you guys just run you run like a King's Alliance. I've seen this done before, and you set that type of a system up, and then you just have players make alts there, so that way they can go ahead and just have all the people that typically do the managing in that alliance, so they can rotate, right? That could be all your officers, your leads, any contributing players, right? These are things that you can do. And now we kind of get to the KvK prep part, right? Which are coming up to your first KvK 1. And the important part is that, one, you want to make sure that you're scouting, right? So obviously taking the time to, put scout accounts in the other kingdoms on the continent, so that way you are ready and in a position when fog is dispersed, or you can kind of just keep up to date on, server mails that they're sending out. You can pull data and some information that might help you guys in your preparation for when KvK 1 comes up. And then probably the last biggest thing that you need to do for your project, right, is once you get access to Lost Temple, you need to make sure that you are sending what I refer to as, just quality King's mails. Making sure that you are informing your base, you are educating your base, and understanding that not every single player knows as much as you do, knows as much as the next person. So if I leave you with an arguably probably one of the best, if not biggest pro tip, is take time to educate your base, right? Take time to inform your base, right? Do more, go the extra mile, right? If you really care about your kingdom and your server's success, especially your project's success, right? Because the worst thing that can happen for any project is that you invest a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of energy, and for whatever reason, it just doesn't come to fruition, right? For maybe how you are looking, for your vision, right, and what you kind of foresee and hope to happen. So these are just really important things to keep in mind, because nobody necessarily wants to waste their time when they're doing a project. But after you end up getting to this point, right, is kind of really when the work starts, right? There's a lot of work that obviously goes in just to making it to Lost Temple, but then you have just as much work once you get to Lost Temple to KvK 1 prep, and then arguably, you really have a lot of the work that starts, because after KvK 1, right, you really have to start kind of thinking about, how are you going to recruit? What's migration look like? Right? How are you going to fill alliances? What system are you even running? So a lot of these things, it's good to kind of get hammered out earlier rather than later. But again, take some advice from someone who has ran multiple projects, who's seen successes, right? Who's seen failures, and there's a lot to take from it. But again, if the earlier you prep, the more friendly reminders, the more you work on getting everyone on the same page and just continuously reiterating those things, right, periodically, it will help you so much more than you may know. And it'll also help you mitigate a lot as well. With that being said, I think that pretty much kind of turns this series out to a close. Again, I think we're at like 6 parts now, if that's right. Maybe I'm off. We'll see. I have to remember. And from there, right, hopefully this will give you a good kind of educational guide on how you can build your jumper project out, things to think about, what to consider, how to think ahead, multiple steps ahead, right? How to work with developing your kingdom for how you kind of get from beginning of the idea of a jumper project all the way up until, KvK 1 arrives. And I hope that these videos have helped you out. And so again, let me know what you guys think in those comments down below. If you've been enjoying this series, as we kind of wrap up with this last video, I'm pretty excited because after this one finishes, I'm hoping to start coming out with some more interesting content too as well for RoK. So with that being said, that's it for me. Until next time, we'll catch y'all later.